I grew up in the days when boys adored tales of knights in shining armour and saving women from bell towers or whatever, rushing around trying to do good. It wasn't only me. The whole of Europe was enthralled by tales like this. Now, people who've never done anything to anybody, all through my generation, none of my people have ever gone to fight a war of any sort, apart from unknown people that joined the army because they felt the need to go and kill somewhere. But none of my friends, I don't know anybody, I've got no family that joined any army or went anywhere to fight anybody. And most of the people I grew up with have never known war. We've certainly never been involved in slavery or of any sort, whether black or white slavery. It makes no difference. And yet, white people are suddenly everybody's target. Everybody is turning against us. Now, if it was only blacks, for example, you could understand it, because you could turn around and say, well, blacks don't know any better because they don't know who's really responsible for anything. So they're just blaming white people because they were told that white people came and took slaves away. They're calmly forgetting, of course, that those slaves were rounded up by black men in Africa and given to people who appeared to be white. But apparently those people who appeared to be white are no longer white, because they would have been Jews in the main, because the slave trade was mostly controlled by Jews, and when the slaves went to their destination in America, it was mostly Jews that owned them. In fact, there are as many black people, rich black people, there was such a thing, owned more slaves than the ordinary white man in the streets of America back in the day. So there's really very little that the white man owe as a debt to black people. In fact, there were more Irish slaves in America than black slaves. There were only 400,000 blacks who were taken into America as slaves. Everybody imagines it was millions, but it wasn't. It was 400,000. And yet 600,000 Irish slaves were used in America, and they were no better off than the black slaves. In fact, in many cases, they were worse off. The blacks were mostly affected when they were liberated. When the slave owners suddenly realised that, well, they had no need to pay for the food to feed these people and clothe them and house them and all the rest of it, because there was enough people now in America to do the work when necessary, which is more or less what we've got now, 0-hour contracts, just hire people when you need them. I mean, my own father can remember days when on the docks, men would turn up in the morning if there was a cargo ship coming in, and the foreman would throw coins into the air, and anybody who managed to catch one of those coins would have a job for the day. And that's the way it was. Other than that, people were just hungry all the time. I mean, just speaking personally, I've had times when I've had no socks to wear, when my socks were so full of holes you couldn't put them on. And the bottom of my shoes had holes in them, and I had to put cardboard paper into the bottoms of my shoes to stop the rain coming in. And there was a lot of other people in the same position. I mean, I had friends that didn't have any shoes at all. You know, so this notion that we owe something to somebody or other is a load of nonsense. We don't know anybody anything. And to be calling for a white genocide, which is what's happening, is just disgusting. All across the Western world now, where immigrants are arriving daily, there is nightmare on the streets, and it's got nothing to do with us. Personally speaking, I've had no hand in what's going on in the Middle East. As far as I'm concerned, everything that's happening in the Middle East is to the benefit simply of Jews, pure and simple. And I can't see how there can be any argument about that at all. Since 1948, when they went into Palestine and started to slaughter people and drive them out of their very homes into camps, even as they were complaining about having been in camps themselves, and they've managed to keep those people in camps for more than 70 years now. And in Gaza, they've got a fence around it, and they won't even allow the fishing boats to go out far enough into the Mediterranean to get decent fish catch. And these people are whining all the time. They never stop whining about how difficult their life has been. They've just opened up a museum, or some sort of modern museum with holograms. of men replying to 20 hours of questions, so that you can ask them just about any conceivable question and they will give you a response. I mean, it's just crazy. Some of these people were in concentration camps when they were 2 and 3 years old. They couldn't possibly give 20 hours of responses to various questions. I find it difficult to remember what I did yesterday, never mind what I did 70 years ago. And yet we're being constantly reminded about this, at the same time as we're being constantly reminded about slavery, and at the same time as we've constantly got women at our throats. Everything is supposedly better for men. All my life I've been told the same thing. It's easy for me. Everything's all right for me. Well, it never felt that way to me, and I'm sure it doesn't feel that way to most other men who are working for a living. And everything just seems to be completely out of hand. There just doesn't seem to be any sort of rhyme or reason to anything that's happening. It's just going on. We've got a genocide going. It's been ongoing now for at least the last 10 years. There's been a genocide going on, and we're made to feel guilty about saying, look, we can't accept 1 million people into Europe. Even as we've already got, in France, for example, we've got 9 million people unemployed. We've got thousands and thousands of people who are homeless. Like all across Europe, people are using food banks because they haven't got enough money to live.
13 hours.
Now, that is part of the plan. That is to bring everybody down to third world level. That's all they're interested in. They're building robots to replace all these low-pay jobs. So all these jobs in McDonald's that all these youngsters are supposedly doing will be gone, because there's one big robot with 12 arms who can handle everything, flip the hamburgers and butter the bread or whatever, all in one go. So you won't need anything. You just need a microphone to order what you want, and then you go along and pick it up at the next window. I mean, the whole business is just crazy. And even as that's happening, the long-standing aim of wiping us out is still going on. They want to get rid of at least 90% of the world's population, and yet nobody even mentions it. It's never even mentioned. I have never heard any mention of that on the world news. And yet it's all over the place. The warnings are all over the place. Learned professors are saying so. Just like these learned professors from the IPCC are telling us that the Earth is warming. They're telling us the sea rate levels are rising. And yet there's no trace of any sea level rise where I live. All the water in all the harbours are exactly the same as they've always been. The tide isn't coming up any higher unless there's a high wind blowing which pushes the odd wave up the beach a bit farther. There's absolutely no sign of it. All the evidence suggests that there's fewer hurricanes than there's been in past times. The snowfall has been increasing year by year. I actually had 75 centimetres of snow 3 or 4 years ago, in a place where most winters you never see a flake of snow. And yet it's all just going on, and we've got politicians who are re-elected time after time after time. They never change a thing. They never do what they promise the people they do. Like now, for example, in Britain. I said right from the word go, right from the very word go, that Britain will never be allowed to leave the European Union. And since then, they've had the referendum, the people have voted to leave, and they expected a Houses of Parliament, which was absolutely packed to the rafters with people who wanted to remain, to handle Brexit. I mean, it's so ridiculous, it's beyond belief. You've got Mrs. May, who's handed a deal to the European Union, which they say is exactly what the Remainers wanted. Nothing will change. Britain will still be in this controlled union. Nobody knows who's pulling the strings. Nobody. Nobody can tell me who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Nobody knows. Just as nobody knows who's pulling the strings behind the United Nations. Nobody knows. It's just a mystery. Who's pulling the strings behind the British Parliament? Nobody knows. Is Jeremy Corbyn a genuine socialist, or is he just another Fabian man coming out of a society that actually set up the European Union? And yet people are in some way expecting him to deliver what the people voted for. Well, he won't. He'll find some way of saying to the people that, well, this is more or less what you wanted, and the people would just be obliged to accept it. There's no way out of Europe. No way at all. They're even talking about a European army now. When the Soviet Union had their army, they were massacring any state that stood against them, like Hungary or Czechoslovakia just went marching in and killed people. And if Europe is allowed to have its own army, that's exactly what will happen. Hungary and Czechoslovakia are at it again. They're out of line, the same as Poland, out of line. They've all suffered in the past for being out of line. And Europe, the European Union, is already threatening them with force. They have to take their share of these immigrants. And the immigrants are to destroy Europe. We're already done for. Sweden is gone. Sweden is finished. Denmark is finished. Belgium is finished. France is practically finished. There's a little bit of hope. Italy claims they're going to stop the immigration, but they can't. Europe is doomed, and people are just standing around saying, oh no, you're just a racist. What's racist about it? I couldn't care less about race. I just can't understand how anybody believes that you can invite 1 million people into a country that's already got 9 million unemployed, and there's a shortage of houses, and you're going to somehow house them, feed them, and find work for them. It's just a nonsense. It just will not happen.